Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to our final session of our 2021 Virtual Landscape Faculty Academy webinar series and our recent graduates panel. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Rainbird, Hunter, Ewing, and Brightview for helping make this event possible. Some housekeeping notes before we get started. I have muted everyone by default, so we won't be disrupted by latecomers or any background noise. Please keep your microphone muted throughout the presentation unless you have a question. During the presentation, if you do have questions, you can ask verbally by unmuting yourself, or you can use the chat box if you prefer. I will be monitoring the chat box throughout the entire presentation, so any questions you post there, I will relay to our panelists. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our panelists, Connor Bolte with Irrigation Consulting, Lauren Fick with Kansas State Research and Extension, Scott Mendenhall with Land Care, and Brad Hill with Par 3 Landscape. Before we get into some of our panel questions, I wanted to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves further and share a little bit about their background. Brad, did you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, my name is Brad Hill. I work for Par 3 Landscapes here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Contrary to our name, we don't do anything on the golf course side. We're an HOA maintenance company. So I oversee all irrigation for our entire company, managing about 600 properties, about 4,000 irrigation controllers, 500 of those being smart irrigation. So I do all the design, maintenance, install for the company.
Great, thanks. Connor, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name's Connor Bolte. I graduated from Kansas State, and in a roundabout way, I ended up moving from Wichita to Nashua, New Hampshire, and I'm working at Irrigation Consulting. I'm an irrigation designer.
Thanks, Connor. Lauren, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lauren Fick. I'm also a Kansas State University graduate, and I currently still work for the university through their research and extension. I work with volunteers, and my primary job is to do community outreach and share information that the researchers and the doctors at the university are doing. So I work with my community a lot, and a lot of just volunteering and stuff like that. So
great, thank you. And last but not least, we have Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott Mendenhall. Graduated from Oklahoma State. Was an E3 learner for the irrigation show when I was in college. Moved from Oklahoma to Northern Virginia and was there for 3.5 years doing irrigation for a high-end residential design build maintenance company. And then within the last year, I'm relocated to San Antonio, and now I work for Land Care, and I'm the San Antonio branch's enhancement and irrigation production manager.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me. For those of you that are attending, this is a pretty informal panel, so if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat or ask verbally. We thought this would be a really interesting perspective to hear from, some students who are now in the industry that either were part of our irrigation E3 program or scholarship program or studied irrigation in college, just kind of hear some of their experiences and, just different perspective than I feel like we usually hear on some of these panels. Oops, sorry, I put myself on mute. I will lead into the first question for you guys. Can you share a memorable moment when one of your faculty members taught you something that still sticks with you today? And any of you guys can jump in if something comes to mind.
I'll go first. So when we were in college, we had a professor who she was a woman, and she was very much about like women in the industry, you can do this too. And one of the things that she always would say is, you weren't born knowing how to do this, and neither was anybody else. And that's something, as cliche as it is, it's stuck with me for all these years, because just in anything in life, especially when you're in the landscape industry as a female and you don't know how to use the equipment, or you've never done some of the things that maybe some of your coworkers have, it can be pretty intimidating. So I like to remind myself of that a lot, is that you weren't born knowing how to do this, and we are all capable of learning. So it's something that I feel like everyone should be reminded of, just when you're in those situations where you don't know how to do something.
Anyone else?
I think a big one for me, a lot of my professors at BYU weren't necessarily experts in irrigation. A lot of them were architects and then horticulturalists. And so they knew a lot about the plant health side and production and all that kind of stuff, but no one really had a really good expertise in irrigation specifically. And so I learned really quickly from the faculty members that the smartest guy in the room is the one that knows who to call for when they need to get help on that kind of stuff. And so as I went to IA and E3 and all that kind of stuff, I made it a point to get to know the CEOs of all the companies, Hunter, Rainbird, Weathermatic, all that kind of stuff, and build a good framework around me. And whenever I have a question and I can't solve something, I know who to call, and that's stuck with me, and it helps me on a daily basis, because I consider myself the smartest guy in the room now, because now I know who to call to help me with all the problems. So.
That's great. Connor or Scott, do you have anything to add?
I remember back in my irrigation class, and my professor, Dr. Lavis at K-State, she said, we were talking about distribution uniformity with sprinkler systems, and she said, Mama Nature has 100% distribution uniformity. And it's kind of shaped the way I've, you're trying to mimic the way the plants were, the conditions that they naturally grow in with everything. And we're trying our best to get to the ideal setting, which is the way they are naturally grown. So.
Anything to add, Scott?
I had a hard time with this one, thinking of like one in particular thing that like stuck out, except just to, give props to our educators that are, teaching us irrigation, because my professor in college was like just spot on, like did everything like by the book, and did a lot of the IA's recommended teaching. And having that kind of a resource, it was super helpful to transition from the theory in the classroom and then actually doing it out in the field. I mean, yeah, you get a lot of experience out in the field, but knowing the more intricate details of how it works and why it works, and going through the process of troubleshooting, had I not had that, the class was it'd be a lot more difficult, and I probably would have been a lot slower at learning it. So just giving props to my professor for doing a great job at teaching. There wasn't anything, I mean, it was all great. I mean, I could say nothing but good things about it.
Sounds like you all had some great educators. Pivoting a little bit more onto irrigation, now that you are in the industry, are there any irrigation concepts you wish you had more exposure to while in college?
I don't have a concept, but just a general area of pumps and the water supply side of things, just in general. A little more exposure. And I may be unique just because of what I do in that, but for me, that would be something I would have preferred to have more exposure to.
Connor, can you expand on that? What do you mean by more specifically? What were you talking about as far as water supply and things like that? The supply.
Well, we do rainwater harvesting different things like that, and just having more exposure to how that's done. So. And pump curve, the engineering side behind that side of things too. So.
Anyone else have any topics or concepts they'd like to mention?
I think a big one for me would be water management. Kind of like I said, I manage about 4,000 controllers across the valley here, 500 of those being smart. And so I didn't really have a lot of background or education in the smart side of irrigation. I manage platforms like CalSense, WeatherTrack, WeatherMatic, Rainbird, Hunter, probably 9 other ones. Those are kind of the main big ones that we do. But navigating the platforms, kind of understanding how to, water managers know how to manipulate the numbers in order to get the desired result out into the field. And then you obviously have to go out into the field and make sure that the plants are responding well to what you're doing. But I really didn't have any knowledge or experience with smart technology before I went out into the industry. And now on a daily basis, I manage smart controllers, master valves, flow sensors, all this kind of stuff, which requires an even higher skill set than a regular irrigation guy out there. So I think that was one thing that if colleges around the country could implement more within their curriculum, I think that'd be super beneficial.
What aspects of smart technologies do you feel would be beneficial that could be taught in the classroom?
Probably a little bit of the troubleshooting. And then I know at BYU, my last semester there, we had WeatherMatic starting to get more involved. And so since I had some familiarity with it, I helped set up a smart system on campus. And then we kind of went through it. When it comes to WeatherMatic, you have an on-site weather sensor and data. So knowing how all that correlates, because basically the smart controllers, they pull ET data from either an on-site sensor or from a weather station off-site somewhere, but really understanding how that all correlates, how they work in conjunction with each other. I think that's probably what needs to happen.
Great feedback, Brad. Scott or Lauren, you have anything to add?
Yeah. Kind of what Connor touched on a little bit about pumps. You know, I mean, I feel like we just kind of briefly touched on it. We didn't learn a lot about it, but they are very important. So learning a little bit more about pumps and pump stations. But then for me, you know, learning or I guess a second thing and then a third thing. Second thing being they'll try to incorporate as much hands-on as possible, because you get a much better understanding of irrigation by doing it. Like you can learn all the theory in the classroom, but until you start doing it, it doesn't quite, you know, it all starts to click at that point. At least it did for me. And then the third thing, sales. Like you can understand it well and good, but if you can't relay it to the client and tell them why they need it or why you think they should switch to whatever smart controller or upgrade in the field, if you want to go from fixed sprays to MPs or whatever you're trying to do, having that knowledge of how to present information to the client and sell them on the work that you're trying to do for them, having that kind of skill set, even if it's just, you know, real brief, a little bit of touch on it, but I think doing a lot more of that would be beneficial.
Great, thank you. Lauren, do you have anything to add?
Not specifically. In the area I live, we kind of do what Connor was talking about, where you harvest rainwater. So when we were in college, since I was local to Kansas, we pretty much went over most of the things that I deal with on a daily basis. So I don't really have a lot to add on this one.
No worries, thank you. So going into a little bit about the industry and your current role, how is the industry or your role different than you thought it would be when you were in school? Are things different than you expected, same as you expected? Did you envision yourself going into a different role? How's industry and your role kind of different than how you imagined it before you entered the industry?
For me, I actually, my degree was in landscape management, so I thought I was going to be doing a lot more work with plants, and ended up that job in Virginia kind of falling into irrigation and just having at it. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it, and it's stuck. And so, in that regard, it's definitely been different. But also, really getting into lighting as well as irrigation. That's a great. It's a great skill set and a great, product to push if you're an irrigator, doing lighting in-house as well as another revenue stream for you. And it can be fun and, artistic. And it was another aspect I really enjoyed that I never thought that I was going to be doing after graduating.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I can speak on this one. So kind of like Scott was saying, I had a degree, it was more so landscape management, and all of my internships were with large landscape companies. And obviously I'm not working for a landscape company. I work for the university, which is not something I pictured myself doing. But I moved to a rural part of Kansas. And so because of that, I kind of had to take what I could, unless I wanted to start my own business. So I thought for sure I would be working, hands-on with the landscaping every day. Instead, I actually do more of the answering questions about plants and horticulture. And like I mentioned, working with volunteers, I do still get my hands dirty, but it's not quite the way I envisioned. And I don't get to work directly with like revenue and that kind of thing. We're not for profit. And so I for sure thought, in college, we didn't really talk about not for profit horticulturist positions because, when you go to the National Collegiate Landscape Competition and some of those other things, those aren't the people recruiting you. It's usually the big landscape companies. And so I thought for sure that I was going to be doing what a lot of my friends are doing, where they're like project managers or they just work directly on a crew, something like that. But because of my degree, I was also able to kind of start a side business that I never would have pictured myself doing, but I spray weeds actually for the oil field. So that's something that really was surprising too, that I just never thought was a possibility or an opportunity for horticulturists. So there are tons of opportunities out there for anybody who's listening that might be rural. You don't have to go work for a large company to use your degree and your knowledge. There's a lot of things out there. You might just have to get a little creative.
Great advice.
I think for me, the biggest kind of shock, I thought I would come in and really learn a lot and be able to kind of work my way through becoming the expert. But what I learned really quick is that coming out of school with a degree, I was supposed to be the expert day one, starting for not only the company, but for the Valley, just because we service so many properties. And it was kind of a really steep learning curve for me, because as soon as I stepped on a property, I was supposed to know how to do pretty much everything. And like I said earlier, I knew who to reach out to learn that kind of stuff quickly and efficiently. But I think that was the biggest shock, is I didn't expect to be the expert as of day one. And I think coming out of these schools with the kind of degrees that we have, whether it's landscape management, horticulture, things like that, we're often looked to as the experts day one if we step into a role. And so it's kind of big shoes to fill, and it's been awesome. I've learned more in the last year and a half than I did in obviously the 4 years at school, just because of how demanding the requirements were on me. But I think that's something that students probably need to be prepared for too. I know a lot of them don't think that they're going to be, the guy in charge as soon as they step out. But a lot of times people look to us for our expertise because of where we've been and what we've done.
Echo all of that. Yeah, that's good information.
Connor, anything to add?
I'd agree with what Brad just said. There's a certain amount of, you're the guy or girl. I mean, you're the person. So, but I never would have thought I'd be designing irrigation systems in the Boston area. So that was a surprise. Awesome opportunity, but surprise.
Glad it worked out though.
Yeah.
Before I go on to some of the other questions prepared, I wanted to see if anyone in the audience had any questions for our panelists.
I do. I have a question. It's Warren Gorowitz with Hunter Industries. I've been here in the background and really enjoyed listening to the comments from all of you. I appreciate you sharing your feedback. I guess from an industry manufacturer, irrigation and lighting manufacturer perspective, and I kind of heard, Brad, I heard your comments about having more access to smart controllers, but what other kinds of things can we as a manufacturer, should we be doing while you're in school to help you feel more confident so you can be that expert that you're looked at being once you're out in the working world?
Yeah, I think a big thing, not only for a sales side on your guys' part, pushing your products, it's getting it in the hands of the kids who are learning this kind of stuff. Like I said, Weathermatic started putting their product into BYU, and so I had a lot of experience with that before I stepped out into the field, but didn't have, I mean, obviously Hunter and Rainbird are probably the most common products that you're going to find out there. But for a lot of people that come into the degree, they don't have experience beforehand of running a company or being in the field. They go into it in college and they've never programmed a clock, they've never changed a valve, they've never done all this kind of stuff. And so I think getting it into the hands of the individuals, if they know how to use it, then they're going to be more successful, not only selling that to the customers or anything like that, but feeling confident in this is the product that they want to use and can kind of go forward from there.
Yeah, we actually installed a system in our irrigation class at K-State. And I don't know if I know there was at least a discount on the product that went in there. And, you know, working with it hands-on, and, you know, that's one way of getting your product in the hands of the students very early, is continuing to give a discount or donate or however to the programs directly. So.
Great.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stickiness. People they get comfortable with the brand and they stick with it. So yeah.
Anyone else have anything to add?
I was just going to kind of echo what Connor said, because we were in the same irrigation class. And the only thing I was just going to, maybe a suggestion is anytime there's a new technology that is going to be expected for people to use, especially as we start talking more about water conservation. I know there's a lot of new stuff out there on the market. It's very intimidating when a product or a device gets put in your hand and you have no idea what to do with it. And people are looking at you, expecting you to know what to do with it. So just getting the newest and the most recent things in the hands of the students, I think would probably be very beneficial as well.
Great.
Yeah. I was going to kind of, echo what everybody else has said. I think it's all good. And additional ways, encourage them to follow whatever social media platforms you guys are on. That's a big way that I find out about a lot of products, is seeing it on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. And, maybe the local rep, can do a field day with like one of the clubs or one of the lab classes, and just bring some product and show them what's new and, what's out there. yeah, just like everybody else has said, getting the product in the hands of the ones in the classroom is gonna be beneficial.
Thank you. You actually answered another question I was going to ask, which is, okay, now you're out of school and you're working. How do we best share information with you aside from going to, say, like an irrigation show? Like, how do you like to get that information? And so social media, I assume, is your generation would say that more so than some of the people that have been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
Which is great. I'm a social media person too, so that's how I get my information, and I'm old. Thank
Yeah.
you for the thoughts on that. Just a follow up to that, are there other ways, that you want to be able to be informed about new products? Do you read emails? I don't know. I'm just curious.
I personally try to sign up for a few of them. I think I'm on Hunters and Rainbirds, whatever web email list. But even when I haven't done a lot here in Texas, but in Virginia before COVID, even like small vendor little showcases for like a day or a half day or a lunch, to me, that's fun. It gets you out of the day-to-day of your workday, and then you get to sit and learn about new product and what's going to make our life easier, what's cool and what's better, and what should we start selling on. And yeah, for me, those are always very informative and helpful. Dave Evers was the rep that we had out there, and he was awesome.
Great to hear. I always like to hear that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll stop monopolizing your questions now.
Any other questions from the audience?
I do have one. You've been talking about that hands-on experience, and I know with our presentation the other day, they were talking about Cal Poly is learn by redoing. Do you feel that, because our classes and our labs are so fast, we have to teach so much, that today is controllers, tomorrow is valves, et cetera, et cetera. And so do you feel that, is there a better way that we can teach that will really ingrain that into your system so you can get better prepared before you leave the university?
Like for BYU, we had a horticulture club that we went to, and we learned about plants and did different projects and things like that. We didn't have one for irrigation, but that might be something that different colleges can do, is maybe start an actual club, just because of your limited time within the semesters that you have to go through all that information that you're required to teach. I think getting some sort of organization outside of the classroom where you can do, and the faculty doesn't necessarily have to be involved if you get the right students in place that have a better understanding of these kinds of things. They can do these clubs where they do those kinds of projects and things like that. And then I think internships are probably the best way. You got to help your students find the best internships that are actually going to give them the experience that they need to really solidify what they're learning in the classroom.
That was a great answer. Thanks.
Anyone else have anything to add to that?
I'll add to that. I think for us, or let me back up. I think doing something sort of like if there's anywhere on campus, or if there's like a botanic garden or something affiliated with the college, if there's work to be done, ask the grounds guy to hold off and let's walk through it with our class, have them do the repair so they can get this experience and really understand what it takes step by step to do the work or make these repairs. I mean, the more you do it, the more you feel comfortable with it. And I think that'd be an easy, semi-easy way to, try and schedule something out or plan something out to get the students the experience that they need.
I would say when we were in college, it's been a couple of years, so I'm trying to remember specifically, but we had one day that was classroom and one day that was the lab time. And I know you guys have certain requirements, so it's not always feasible, but it seemed like we sat in the classroom and looked at stuff a lot, like the difference between a diaphragm and a centrifugal pump, which is beneficial. But when you're talking about an irrigation system, more than anything, it's better to just get out there and do it. And we had a lot of times where we had multiple labs, and one lab would start on the irrigation system, then the next lab would go and work on the same one, and we would miss a part of it because they were on a time frame too to get this system put in. So really, we didn't get to spend as much time actually installing it with our class. And it was still a really great experience, but we had a large class too, so there would be 20 kids out there all huddled around the one spot, and you couldn't see what was going on. And so I guess it would have been nice if we had multiple people that were, there was some people out there, but there was just a lot going on at once. And so trying to find a way, like he said, like maybe a club or something where kids can go and like truly learn this stuff, or even like they said on campus, something along those lines would be really helpful. Because while it's important to know the different gallons per minute and all those different things, they are important. It's more important to actually know how to do the physical labor, because that's what they're going to expect at the job versus you knowing and rattling off all these facts that you know about irrigation.
Connor, anything to add?
Not really. I think they pretty well covered it. I mean, if I had to choose between a lecture and a lab, I'd rather have the lab. So say that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from our audience?
I have a question. I don't know if my video will go on, but anyway, sorry, I'm Yvette. I'm an extension agent in Florida, and I work more with the like the landscapers and the people like y'all are talking about that are actually working in the landscape and doing the work. And I don't know if in your jobs you're interfacing with those folks. It seems like you might be kind of higher level or working with the controllers remotely or things like that. But if you do work with folks like that, what do you see that they need to know that you're having to spend time, teaching them or letting them know of?
So I have a direct relationship with the guys that do the install work. I manage all the irrigation for the company. Even this morning before I came here, I was out installing a 2-wire system with my guys because they don't have a really good understanding of how it works and all that kind of stuff. What I've done here at Par 3, I mean, I've got guys that have been irrigation technicians for 20 years and they still don't know the ins and outs of irrigation. That's what you get with the workforce. Is there's really not people that are super experienced. And so that's where we come in, and we kind of have to be those guys like I was talking about. So most of the time I spend 6 hours in the field, and then I'll spend another 4 to 6 in the office doing all the paperwork, organizational stuff. And then once a month, what I do here at Par 3 is I bring all my guys in once a month, and I hold a 2-hour training on a Friday. And I go through electrical troubleshooting. I go through 2-wire systems. I go through whatever it is. And so I directly work with them, and I try and train my workforce to be as proficient, professional, and experienced as possible. And that also aligns with my motto here is give them the right knowledge, but also the right tools. And obviously the knowledge comes first, and then the tools come second. And so what I do is I go through how to use a toner, how to use a tracker, all this kind of stuff. And then I'll buy them for my team once they know how to use it. And then they become more experienced and are able to tackle problems. But yeah, I directly work with them every single day, and it's a blessing.
Thank you.
I'd echo a lot of that. Just you can have like you were saying, you can have 20-year guys that they think they know it all, but they don't. And even as something as simple as leaving a head, flush and straight, you can't have it sticking out of the turf, and you can't have the area, super dirty and, not putting the soil back around the head properly, or if it's, at a little bit of an angle, it's not going to get the right uniformity. So really teaching them the finer details and working hands-on with them, spending a couple days with them a week or whatever. I mean, however it works in your schedule, but just showing them the finer details is what I feel like I've had to do a lot more of. I mean, they know the basics, but teaching them the finer details and why it needs to be done that way is what I've had to do a lot of.
Two easy mistakes that I see that's pretty basic is nozzles on rotors and doing that right so you have match precipitation, and just scheduling just on the controller, and whether you're way over watering, I mean, that's a simple way to save water that especially homeowners really, I mean, they'll be completely off on that. So those two things for specifics.
So I'll speak directly from another extension agent's perspective. So we don't have like tons of irrigation around here because we don't have access to water like a lot of other places do. But one thing we have a lot of problems with is rotors being at the wrong angle and running down the street. You can get a fine in our town if you have water running down your street, not having the right sprinkler heads, those types of things. And so really around here, the companies, they don't contact us because they don't want to be told that they're doing it wrong. And we don't really have access to like trade shows and stuff like that. So when I mention things like, hey, have you thought about a subsurface irrigation because it's very windy and hot here? People are like, well, what's that? I've never heard of that. And so really what it is around here is that people they don't know about our new technology or things that are offered, or they're scared to try it because they've never done it. So I've often thought it would be awesome to team up with someone like Rainbird Hunter or someone like that and just show people, hey, this is an option because there are other places in our country that also have water restrictions, and this is what we can do because we still need it and we still need lawns. So just, as far as that stuff goes, we really, at least with K-State Extension, we kind of get avoided. So we're working on it though.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from the audience?
Connor, we have, I guess I've got a limited opportunity to teach design components in our irrigation courses. With a very limited amount of time to be able to devote to design, what would be 2 or 3 primary, components that you think would be important for them to at least learn? What are some of the three basic components for design? What would be the best things for them to learn?
As far as the actual irrigation components going in the system,
or what I just meant is just
or more of concepts.
Irrigation or design concepts. If you're limited on how much time you've got to be able to teach them about design, what would be some of the most critical things, or at least some important things for them to at least take away from an irrigation course?
Pipe and valve sizing. Sorry, I've got my phone in here. Pipe and valve sizing. That's a big one. Being able to schedule, I suppose that'd be another, schedule the system on the controller side of it. Because that's I suppose that's done on the installation, but that's part of design. And it's a good question.
If you can just, I guess while we're here, just kind of digest that one a little bit and see what
Sure.
kind of pops into your head after a bit.
I think for me, since I do a lot of design work for Part 3 as well, Flow is the biggest thing that people don't understand, and starting with the meter, that's going to determine how much flow you have right off the bat. The biggest thing I hate seeing out in the field, and it kind of depends on the requirement, is a 1-inch valve with a piece of 1-inch pipe sticking out of it, because you automatically restrict yourself to 12 gallons a minute when that 1-inch valve can flow up to 20. And so most of the time, people automatically assume that 1-inch correlates with 1-inch, where realistically, you can take a 1-inch valve, stub out 1.25 inches, and then have your flow up to 20 gallons a minute. But people just don't really understand the concept of flow and how that correlates with what's going on in the field. And then I think if people understand flow first and foremost above everything, then design becomes super, super easy after that. But that's just one thing that they have a hard time correlating in their mind is how that functions throughout the system.
I was going to say the same thing. Flow, hydraulics. I mean, having a good understanding of how all that works. That's how it gets easier to learn how to pipe size, and then learning how to pipe size can translate to learning how to size your wire, because it's very similar how electricity flows through wire as water does through a pipe. I think distribution uniformity, trying to be as close to that as possible is good to know. And also, designing for the plants that are in the zone that it's going to be on. You don't want to put turf and beds on the same zone, really trying to dial in on the plant material with the zone, and even getting as detailed as, specific microclimates, because there could be, a whole bed along the front of the house, or, some people, will do the front of the house and the side of the house on the same zone. Well, maybe the side of the house gets more shade, and so that could be a different microclimate, and it might need different water requirements. And understanding that concept while they're designing, I think, is important as well.
Another big one for me, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say another big one for me as a maintenance contractor is looking at how easy it is to maintain out in the field after it's installed. A lot of times we'll get valves that don't have a ball valve in front of it. And so you have to shut down the whole main line in order to change out a valve or a diaphragm or whatever it is. So those concepts of looking at isolation valves, looking at, I think sometimes landscape architects and irrigation designers have a hard time looking 5 to 10 years in the future when things start to fail. And so for me, that's one thing I have the luxury of, is on all the properties, I always see 5 to 10 to 20 years in the future and what can go wrong. And so in my irrigation designs, I always go, okay, in 20 years, this is going to make it a lot easier to service versus just kind of doing a simple design and running with it. So I think that's one thing that you guys might focus on too throughout your curriculum is looking at the age of a system and not looking at, okay, here's the original install, but what is this going to look like 10, 15 years down the road? And how is this going to be easily maintained after it's installed?
So designing from a maintenance perspective, i.e., on your valve manifolds, why not add unions so that if a valve does go bad, you can pop it in and out very easily without having to do any cutting or anything else like that? Some similar simple things like that.
Yeah, like I said, ball valves, unions, just all that kind of stuff that if you're looking at in the future, I mean, it even depends on the type of filter you use. Like here, we have sometimes we need to hook up a hose to the irrigation system, and most of the time the irrigation system isn't designed with quick couplers. So putting in a valve for us that has the ability to hook on a hose to get some additional water to hand water wherever we need to is something that we look at in our designs. And it kind of depends on your geographic location, what kind of practices and culture is in that area. But looking at, that kind of stuff of how easy it is to maintain in the future.
Connor, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Just kind of to add to Scott's point, just precipitation rates and lowering that. I mean, you rather do drip from a water savings standpoint than spray. So, and not mixing things that have different precipitation rates on your zone. So.
From a design perspective, are you seeing a greater use in, I guess, stream rotors, you know, the low precip rate stream rotors and things like that? Has that improved DU as well as infiltration rates and application, everything else like that?
Yeah. And in cases where you'd want to, you know, knowing when you would want to use that too, because if you're on a clay slope, you're going to want to use a rotary nozzle for the spray sprinkler. You're going to be more likely to use it. Also, I guess you can save money. I mean, you save money by putting in less heads if they can throw further. So, I mean, that's a pretty easy key concept of just what's the cheapest way to do this effectively. And it's two birds with one stone. Lower, it's cheaper, but it's also a lower precipitation rate that's more efficient. So.
Any other questions?
I have a question. This is Katie Powell. I'm with Monroe. I've been enjoying Connor's poster behind him today. There, little Monroe, and I appreciate the pump questions and agree that is a topic that I think we can do a better job of simplifying and providing information on. But my question is, if you guys could tell us about if there are any classes or specific activities that have been the most relevant or useful. I know you all have different roles, but just curious about which of your classes do you feel like you kind of call on that information the most?
For me, even after being an E3, I reattended the IA show, and just going through a different set of classes that I hadn't already been through. For me, that was super, super helpful. For me, the electrical side was always specifically with like 2-wire. Like I understand how it works, but like getting into the more intricate side of it, it took a while to learn. So for me, that was really helpful. And then local vendors coming out, or being tight with your rep, you know, being really close with them and having a good relationship. All of that for me has been very, very helpful. But I don't know if I could call out any one specific class necessarily.
Any other thoughts?
During my college career, there actually wasn't a landscape irrigation class offered. So I kind of self-taught. I ran a landscape company from when I was 8 to 19. So I was self-taught in the field for quite some time, knew a lot going into it. And then throughout college, because our program was more centered around horticulture and production, we didn't have landscape irrigation classes. There was an ag irrigation, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to take it because it wasn't going to specifically pertain to what I was going to do. So yeah, I think the IA is one of the best resources if you actually want to go learn about specific things. They have great resources and great material to go look and learn and attend those courses and all that kind of stuff.
Would a meteorology course be beneficial for what you guys have been doing once you've graduated?
I could see it being beneficial. I mean, yeah, you know, if you're taking care of a system, you're managing a system, and yeah, I could see that being beneficial.
I also think like a soil science class like is super beneficial, because learning about infiltration rates and how water is in the soil and you like pass through the soil, and then how the plant can uptake it, is very, very, crucial when it comes to scheduling and knowing what you want your application rates to be and this and that. So I think that would be another helpful class.
Yeah, I think ET is probably one of the biggest thing that probably needs to be referenced and taught a little bit better, because I didn't understand it throughout college. I heard the reference, I don't know, 100 times, but I never really understood it until I got into the industry. When I wake up in the morning here in Las Vegas, I kind of go, okay, today looks like a 0.3 day, and I'm referencing the ET. And then I can kind of, that's just kind of how my mind works now that I'm managing water and different things like that. But no one thinks about how that kind of correlates throughout school. And so I think kind of teaching something like that, going outside, okay, what do you guys think the ET is today? How does that correlate? If the ET is 0.25, how much do we need to water for turf? How much do we need to water for plants? And kind of making those correlations, I think, would be super beneficial.
I could echo that too. A lot of the questions I get from homeowners are, so how long should I water my lawn? And a lot of times I'm like, well, how wet is the soil? And they don't usually understand that. So I would agree with what he's saying, is understanding better about, how the water moves and different qualities of water and where it's coming from. Just really a course on water in general just would be really beneficial, I think, because that's your main focus, is delivering water. And we do need to conserve it, and especially areas like this. I know everybody has their own different climates and stuff, but just in general, it's nice to be able to explain to homeowners why it's important to have a weather system that will turn your sprinkler system on and off and can gauge these things for you. So that would be just kind of what I would suggest, maybe.
So Brad, I guess helping the students understand, if they were looking at a weather forecast and be able to more quickly, I guess, come up with, what it is, like it's a 0.25 ET day or a 0.3 ET day or whatever kind of thing, and just kind of really try to drive that point home a little bit better.
Yeah, because everyone understands, oh, water's evaporating, it's transpiring. But like, I just never really understood how important that concept was until I started programming clocks and looking at what's going on. And like, today's 115, but to me, it's a 0.5 ET day. And that means, man, it's really hot, it's windy, the plants are going to need a little bit more water. And so when you get into forecast, irrigating, or even developing a schedule that kind of accommodates for those higher days and things like that, it's super important to understand how that all correlates to make sure that you're watering properly.
Guys, any other questions for our panelists? I know we're getting close to 3 p.m. Eastern mark. Any other questions?
So my question is, how do we attract more younger students to our industry?
Anyone have any ideas? I know that's the $1 million question.
I have when people go into landscape management, when they go into horticulture, all that kind of stuff, it's so funny. Everyone wants to be a part of the sexy side of landscaping, which is design, building these beautiful landscapes, landscape architecture, being a designer. No one wants to be a part of the water management, irrigation side, because it's not sexy. So maybe finding a way to make irrigation sexy. I don't know, but I think just getting people interested in it. Most people, like I said, just want to be a part of that side that's really glorious, really fun, really interesting. And irrigation really isn't marketed as such. And so I think marketing it a little bit better and really showing the different opportunities that are in the irrigation industry. You can be an irrigation designer, you can be a full-time installer. There's just so many avenues that you can go. I mean, there's 150 different jobs that you can do within the irrigation side of the industry that people don't know about. People think it's glue and pipe together, when you can be like a Warren and work for a manufacturer, be on the distribution side, be on the construction maintenance side, whatever it is. I think being able to market it a little bit better and help people understand what opportunities are actually out there, I think is important.
So do you think we need to market it more as maybe like social eco-activism? You know, we are creating an ecosystem that's great for the environment because we're conserving water. We are creating habitat for wildlife, you know, and we're creating shade, conserving energy because we're cooling things down, you know, and the psychology of plants and landscapes is that there's less crime around landscaped areas. So is that the direction we need to travel in?
Yeah, I think so. And then not only that, like specifically here in Las Vegas, Lake Mead's at the lowest that it's ever been. We're down on our last pump actually for the reservoir. And so my job as a water manager, as an irrigation specialist, I mean, I think I have the best job security in the world. There's going to be a high demand for people like me that actually know what they're doing, know how to conserve water, know how to manage smart systems. I think marketing it as, and I think as we go on in the next 5 to 10 years, high quality irrigation specialists are going to be the most demanding title within the industry, just because of how the water resource is going and what kind of expertise are going to be needed to be successful in the industry. So I think, yeah, like you're saying, that side of it, and then just helping people understand that this is going to be the most important thing to focus on going forward, just based on what the climate's doing.
Do any of our other panelists have anything to add?
Persistence. I mean, it's definitely a challenge to sometimes get people interested in it, but persistence is great. I also think, you know, for me, like kind of my journey was, I started out as a mechanical engineer and found out that I really hated it. And then did landscaping and loved it, and fell into irrigation. And looking back, I found that irrigation has kind of scratched that technical itch that I think I was looking for with mechanical engineering, because I love how technical it can be, and like when you get into the in-depth hydraulics and scheduling and even the smart technology, like it does, you know, fill that more technical role. So, you know, even outside of just targeting, you know, ag-based schools, trying to target even like STEM programs could be another avenue to try and, you know, gain more students and say, hey, have you thought about, you know, irrigation or irrigation management? And like Brad was saying, I mean, it's fantastic job security. There's going to be no shortage of positions available for that role.
Great. Thanks, guys, for that feedback. I know we're right at 3 p.m., so I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I wanted to see if we had any last burning questions before I wrap this up. And do our panelists, do you have anything to add as we wrap up? Okay, well, with that, I think I will close out our panel. Again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this panel. We appreciated hearing your perspectives and feedback. So thank you so much for being willing to be a part of this panel. This does wrap up our 2021 Virtual Landscape Faculty Academy webinar series. So again, thank you to our panelists and thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.